Welcome to episode 161 of Girl Take the Lead, where each week we explore womanhood and leadership. And I'm your host, Yo Canny. Hannah MacDonald-Dannecker, Gen Z, joins us. And it was such good stuff when I was speaking with her. I wanted to keep every gem and insight she offered. So I broke our recording into two parts. And this is part one. And we'll cover insights about her book called, well, Shoot, but that's not exactly the title, but I need to keep the podcast clean. So you can find the real title on Amazon. We're going to talk about friendships and situationships, a word that she came up with, imposter syndrome, and then something about her family business. And then in part two, we're going to talk a little bit about job searching and how to maintain Gen Z employees and Gen Z balance and flexibility. So you need to check that out. I'll be posting part two on Thursday. I just got to say, this girl is not only taking the lead, but puts me to shame if I remember what I was doing at 25. And I got to tell you, Hannah has 4 books published, including the one that we'll discuss, is a sought after public speaker to help others connect with Gen Z workers. And as a partner and sales and marketing manager at the Better Together group of companies, she brings insights that business leaders cannot get anywhere else about how to work with Gen Z employees. Enjoy the listen. And here you go. So, Hannah, welcome to Girl Take the Lead. I get always so excited when I have a Gen Zer in the house and and we can have some fun. And
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. We're going to have a great talk
yeah,
today. It'll be very fun. I love the over generational conversations. It's always so interesting to me to talk to people who are just not like me at all. Like I love to learn from
yeah.
other people and get some different perspectives.
Well, and congratulations on your book and your business and your podcast. I mean, you've got a ton of things going on and leading in so many different ways. I'm just thrilled that you're here and you can share a little bit about your journey. And how about, though, let's give our listeners a little bit of background about you. If you wouldn't mind
Mhm.
downloading that for them, that would be great.
Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a bird's eye perspective, I am a born Canadian. I currently live in the United States of America. I was a human resources student at Liberty University and graduated from there in the midst of a pandemic, which quickly brought me back into Canada, where I immediately began working for my family business. And pre-pandemic, I was a substitute teacher for high school students, which gave me a major love and passion for just kind of Generation Z, the generation that I sit in myself. And
Mhm.
as I transitioned back in the pandemic into my family's business, which is staffing, we help people find employees and we help people find jobs. And so kind of took those two things and mushed them together. And out of that came this presentation where I go around and speak to different HR professionals about how to recruit and retain the next generation because we're very, very different from the millennials who walked before us. And then kind of in partnership with that, with no anticipation of either of these things really coming through to fruition in the midst of the pandemic, Canada was very different than anywhere else. In Ontario specifically, was a very, very different experience through COVID-19. And so I was in a pandemic lockdown. I think I was traveling, don't tell anybody, across the border a lot through the pandemic when the border was closed.
With the mask on, I'm
Um,
sure. Oh,
Absolutely with a mask on.
wink, wink.
Yeah, yeah. No, so I was going across the border a lot. But I think I did 7 or 8 14-day quarantines. So I spent a lot of time at home by myself
Mm.
in the last couple of years. And through that, I started writing a book named Well Shoot, but for the adults. And I put this book out kind of with the hope and anticipation of giving my future children the hope to connect with their mother when I was their age because I think that
Yeah.
I will grow and I
Good.
will age and it's going to be great. And I can't wait to speak to them as a mother who has experienced life. But I also know, being the age that I am, that sometimes when my mom tells me something, I'm like, I don't want to listen to you. Like, you don't know. And so I was like, well, but I don't want to do that to my kids and I don't want them to do that to me. So I started putting these notes together, and they were really just journals and diary entries at first that turned into a crazy book, and they all kind of spiraled together. And then from that and those two things, I moved back into the United States, where I currently live today with my husband in Orlando. And I started a business here that co-partners with my family's business in Canada. And so now we run coast to coast, North America, helping people just staffing HR kind of across the board.
And I think your lane is kind of helping companies understand Gen Zers and
Hmm.
differences. So um, I think that's just marvelous because most of the time you get these generations looking and going, but what? What? You want time off? Like, you don't take time off. You work to death. This is what you do. And no, 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 no. But we'll get into that a little bit more. But um, what about the book? I mean, your journey is and there's so many terrific insights and that you had as you went along in your journey. And what were some of your faves that kind of came out of that? I got to tell you, I loved your brothers. I love the stories about your brothers and how they helped you see things about yourself. But what about
Yeah,
you?
there's nothing like a sibling to really humble you. And so that was definitely really great. I love both of their stories, but I think my favorite one my favorite one, oh my gosh, that's like really a really hard question. But I think that my favorite one was running in the rain with my best friend Hannah, who
Mm-hmm.
also has the same name I do. And so that was, I think, in 2022, maybe. It was such a simple story. We were going out for dinner and we were sitting on a patio and we got rained out. We were like, okay, what are we gonna do? We're gonna go back to the hotel. It's vacation. We were supposed to be having fun. We were a little sad about it. And on the way home, we kind of had two options, right? You can let it ruin your night, or
Mm-hmm.
you can just lean into it. And she and I leaned into it really hard. And she, I mean, being the girl that she was, the college students that we were, she stuck her head out the window. She was like, I love the rain. We came in, we turned the car off and blasted music about dancing in the rain, and we ran and played and had so much fun as just these these growing up adults.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't 19 anymore, and so it wasn't like we were still in this like we want to be adults like reaching for it stage, but it was that we were just starting to transition into some level of responsibility, feeling that insane sense of like, oh my gosh, what is this life going to be moving forward? But we were still able to experience so much joy and pleasure in the most simple form. And
Yeah.
I think that that is so important for people to remember as people chase life. Because
Uh,
everyone's chasing life in some degree or another.
right.
And at one point, it'll just kind of start to feel very similar. But if you can't enjoy some of those most simple, fundamental moments with the people that are around you, it's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
So I think that that was one of my most favorite lessons from it.
You also talk a little bit about friendships versus situationships, which I thought
Mm,
was a great insight because I've done a couple episodes about work friends. I've always thought of friendship as a spectrum, and sometimes you start as acquaintance and then you work your way up. But talk a little bit, if you would, about how you see those kinds of relationships.
mm. So when I was a kid, I had a massive desire to love. I was like, I love people. I went into staffing. That's what you do.
Mhm.
I genuinely love to like show love to and spoil people, whether they are my siblings, my friends, my parents, whatever that may be. And I found myself getting really hurt really, really regularly by
Mhm.
investing in people all the time and then getting nothing back from them. And I want to be really careful not to say that friendships need to be transactional because they don't. But if, as a person, you're consistently giving your love, attention, time, and energy to one individual and they're not reciprocating that in any way, shape, or form, it's not going to be good for you in the long run. Like, that's just not a healthy relationship. And so, relationships do not need to be 50-50. In fact, I would recommend that relationships, if they're true friendships or relationships of any form, are not hardly ever 50-50, because hardly ever are two people experiencing life at the same rate, at the same capacity, and able to give to one another equally at the same time. Uh, but I think that there does need to be an ebb and flow of what you give and what you get from one another.
Mm.
And so I had to, as a young adult, take a really big step back and look at the relationships in my life and say, what am I giving to these? And what am I getting from these? And why have I put some of them on a pedestal?
Mm.
Because some people I got into relationships with, and I was like, I can't believe they want to be my friend. That's so cool. And I would get so excited about this concept or this idea of a human that I've built up in my brain. And then the reality of it is so different from what you've expected. And I mean, that goes both ways. That's
Yeah.
something I built up in my brain. I need to make sure that I solve that myself because I can't put expectations on something or on someone that they can't live up to. But at the exact same time, that person needs to know that I'm investing in them as a human. And if that is going to continue forward in a way that's good, I would want them to care about me the same way that I care about them. And
Mhm.
so that chapter actually started off with a much more calculated story because I had a very significant period of time where I graded my friends. And this is so funny. But I was moving from Canada to Florida, and I was like, I only have so much time to give, and I need to meet a bunch of new people. And so, who am I going to stay in contact with? Why am I going to stay in contact with? How am I going to stay in contact with them? And like, why? And so I sat down and I made this massive spreadsheet. It's the dorkiest thing ever. I was like I was a 19-year-old doing this. It was ridiculous. But I looked at, just from a granular perspective, everybody in my life. And I
Mhm.
was like, what do I get for how do I feel when I leave this conversation? Do I feel energized and excited? Do I feel exhausted and drained? How do I feel before going into these conversations? Why do I feel that way? What has this relationship looked like for the last 5 or 10 or 15 or now 25 years? I turn 25 next week and I've got friends that I've had since birth. Like, it's so exciting, but at the exact same time, it has to be so intentional. And
Mhm.
so I took time to create this schedule of I love these people, and these people accept love through one of these 5 love languages. And how am I going to give that to this person this year? And I just kind of
Mhm.
create a calendar for myself because you know what, time gets away from us. And
It
it's
does, and I think you're right that it takes attention and it
Mhm.
takes. But you know the thing I'll tell you is we just had about a month ago. I had a 50-year reunion. This is listeners. This is you can imagine. We got a boomer over here and a Gen Zer, but we had our 50-year for my college sorority, and we haven't seen each other for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And they would probably be on your spreadsheet as, oh, very fun at some point, but then you lose contact with them. Yeah,
Mhm.
because you can't stay in touch with everybody. And, but I'll tell you what the beauty is you can come back to the situation that you had, like you're talking about this in college, and then go, wow. And then you connect as if time hadn't passed. And
Yeah,
you're,
reminiscing is so, so special. But I think that that's such a great example of it is you're in university. In university, you want your fun friends. So you want to
mhm,
think about how you're feeling and what you're doing and how you're going through those motions with them. But as a 30-year-old, 10 years later, when you were starting your family and trying to have kids and starting to build your home, those fun friendships from the downtown nights weren't as valuable as the core friendships
exactly.
that you were able to sit on the couch with and be like, I can't believe my son pooped his pants again. Like, what a different relationship, right? And so it's
Yeah.
just it's so easy to let those things like pass you just in the breeze.
They
But
do. And they come back to you sometimes. It's just like you
yeah.
just don't know the journey on the whole journey. Like you know it for that moment and you can be present to it, definitely. I also think you had some wonderful things to say about imposter syndrome because and your positive take on it, that it's
Mhm.
something to learn from. And it was,
Yes.
I thought, really nice. We can talk a little bit about that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think lots of people, I mean, 70% of people struggle with imposter syndrome. And so I think so many people think that you can stop it. You can cut it out of your life. You can get it to stop coming to you. And they're like, what's the secret sauce to getting rid of imposter syndrome? And in my brain, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have any idea. If you can figure it out, please tell me.
Mhm.
But I can figure out how to use it to my advantage. And so I used to look at imposter syndrome as this really big stop sign. This don't come down this road. This is really scary. You're not ready for this yet, kind of stop sign. And then I was like, the first time that you do anything, it's going to be scary.
Mhm.
And so rather than seeing it as a stop sign, I want to see it as a warning light, as a, hey, this is new. Hey, you should be cautious of this. You should be careful. You should be intentional about what you're doing moving forward. But don't let it stop you. Don't let it scare you. Just let it help you make the right choice and be really careful about what you're doing as you step forward. And
Mhm.
so I think it's more about adopting it and learning to love it than letting it freak you out.
Yeah. I think one thing I've seen recently about myself is that I'm starting an element to my business from the podcast to look at offering some products on my website. And so I'm
Ooh.
new, right? It's like new stuff, new. And my career, I did a lot of new product work. So I was feeling like the creative juices are no issue for me. But when it comes to the operations, and I mean, my head can explode like, now what's the platform I've got to use for that? And I almost have to look at it and go, wait a minute, it's okay that I don't know. And I think that's the thing about imposter syndrome, in that it's okay for you not to know something
Hmm.
and you can learn it. And
Absolutely.
right. And that you can't, like in my, like sometimes in your learning curve, I know for me, there's certain moods that come along. Like when I'm first starting, I'm like in a pink cloud, like, oh, this is going to be great. And then as I get into the learning curve, I'm like, oh my God, this is too much. I become very dramatic. The Latina in me comes out and I'm like, oh my God,
I
why am
can't
I
do
doing
it.
right? Right. And then I'll get through that phase and I'll get back to the creative flow, which is what kind of gets me over the edge. Like, okay, no, this is right. I'm on the right track. I just need to go through these different phases and I'll be okay.
It's
Right.
like when you clean your room or your house, it always gets messier before it gets cleaner. It's always a little more scary before it looks really good. And I felt that way a lot with the book. When I was writing it, I was coming to the end and I was just so overwhelmed by the just the overwhelmingness that it was. And I
Yeah.
had this one quote that really helped me, and it was that perfection paralyzes the process of progress. So if you're consistently looking for perfection, you're probably not going to continue moving forward.
Hmm.
And so just take a step. Just whatever that next step is, take it and kind of let it help you, which is really relevant to the podcast or to the whatever offerings that you're trying to make. And if you need
Right.
help with some of those, I would love to chat afterwards, see if I can help and figure it out.
Thanks.
But
Thanks.
it's about starting it, right? It's about
Mhm.
taking the step to be like, this is something that I'm doing, and then telling somebody, and then making it public, and then just continuing pushing it forward. But it's so hard when it's scary and overwhelming.
Yeah, those moods that come and the emotions that you're hit with. So have you been able to pretty much take all this? I mean, you're so grounded and wise, um, and move
Thank
that into
you.
your business. Like, talk a little bit more about your business that you've set up.
Yeah, so I think that anything in practice is super great. Or anything, sorry, what is the correct term for that? Anything in concept is great and in practice is not as easy. And so I can say all of this and I can tell myself all of this. And sometimes I say it out loud to continue to convince myself. But I mean, as humans, we are not perfect.
Mhm.
And so it's not always that simple. And specifically in staffing, staffing is hard. Staffing is all about human beings, and human beings are uncontrollable. And so for us, we are just all about communication. It's
Mm.
like, you know what? I can't make this perfect, but I can communicate with you. I can't make this fantastic. I can't guarantee this, that, or the other. But what I can tell you is that I'll communicate with you through the whole thing. And that's really been our thing most recently through kind of the pandemic, and then the shifting, ever changing, never ending, who knows what recession that we just won't talk about. Which is always good. But I think the other thing that relates more specifically to the book, and this comes because it's a family business. It's my
Mm.
dad's business, and he started it. And so he talks about this at work, he talks about this at home. But we talk about the concept of three I's a lot, and it's been ingrained in me since I was a baby. It is intensity, intentionality, and integrity. It is who you are every single day behind the closed door when people aren't watching.
Mm.
It is how intensely you're doing what you're doing every single day and how intentional you are about what you're doing. And so we talk about that. I mean, that comes out in my life in every which direction, but we talk about that a lot through just how we do hires and how we try to find people.
That's so cool. So intensity, integrity,
Intention.
intentionality. Did I get that
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Oh,
Yes, you
good.
did.
Oh, terrific. And I guess that would be your mission, right? Is that kind of like your mission statement to communicate and to bring that
I
point of difference?
I think my mission statement is to connect.
Uh-huh.
I I like to connect people with the jobs they need. I like to connect employers with the people they need, and I like to connect humans with the information that might serve them to help them make the choices that they are along the way.
Wow. That sounds so good. One thing we
Thank you.
talked a little bit about um, was things that Generation Z are looking for that are
Absolutely.
kind
My
of
bread and butter.
different. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what do you think they're looking for that differentiates them?
Mhm. So technology is the first and most important thing that they are interested in. I hmm, think it's 97%. I have a presentation on it. I can quote it and get you those stats if you're really interested, but it's 97% up or down one or two. That will make a decision about where they want to work based on the technology that's in the company. And
Mm.
so that means a ton of different things, right? That means the technology that you're using to be seen by the public. So, what does your marketing look like? What does your brand awareness look like? That means the technology that's being used inside the company. So, what does your ATS look like? What does your CRM look like? What
Mhm.
do all of your internal softwares look like? Are you on Teams? Are you on Workplace? Are you on Microsoft? Like Google Meet? What's the suite that you're using? And then they're also super interested in just good quality equipment. If you put them at a computer that is a decade old and it takes 5 minutes to load a website, they're going to get so mad at the equipment that anything beyond the surface of the literal hardware will not matter. And
Mhm.
so those are kind of the three things in tech that are super important for Gen Zs. And then outside of that, everybody wants to be paid a fair and living wage. So I won't even say that that's one of them, but we'll just make that a note.
Mhm.
Um, but flexibility, they crave flexibility in a ton of different ways. And again, just like tech, this can be seen so differently. And for HR professionals, I really want them to understand that they have so much power and control over this. People hear the words flexibility and they're like, oh my gosh, no, I can't do that. And it freaks them right out because they're like, I need them to be in the office from 9 to 5 or whatever that is. And that's totally fair and reasonable because different companies have different stipulations that their employees have to live up to. But I would just encourage employers to take a big step back and say, okay, what kind, where, what, both, where and what kind of flexibility can I offer? So, where are they doing the work and what is being done?
Mhm.
Personally, I'm a sales and marketing manager because I can't focus on just sales and I can't focus on just marketing. I love both of them desperately. I'm actually adding consulting into that too. So I'm like, I've got one day a week that goes to one avenue of the company in every which direction, which means that every day that I wake up, I'm so excited to see what happens. So I'm like, I just don't even know. Like my days are so different consistently. And that's so exciting to me. And that's what flexibility feels like to me. Now I might be chained to my desk from 9 to 5, but I've got flexibility in what I'm doing. And so that's kind of one of the things, or what time they're doing it, or where they're doing it, or how they're doing it, or
Yeah.
XYZ. Like
I
you play with it as you will, right? And so,
yeah, because I think in my career design, I must have been a Gen Zer in heart, because I needed the flexibility, and the way that I built it into my career was by changing jobs. So,
mm,
okay, I launched these products, and what's next? Oh, you don't have anything. Okay, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do some more new product launches. And then, you know, that was how I kept myself interested and stimulated.
mhm,
And so, maybe it's not that different, in some regard, that we're, as human beings, we have curiosity. We want um, new things to happen, and we want the stimulation.
mhm,
So, or some people, I got to say, not everybody wants that, but I do. So, it sounds like a little bit of a different take on it. Now, one thing we do hear a lot about is Gen Zers want balance. Is and I think what you're saying though is flexibility could be something like balance. Ah, okay.
I
Yeah.
think you're right on the nose there. I think that it's important to keep in mind Generation Z came into the workforce at a time where they came in with it looking completely different than it's ever looked before. And so our base of standard and basic and norm is very different than most other people. And so lots of generations, I mean, generations struggle with the new generation regardless. 20-year-olds can suck because they're 20-year-olds, right? Like we're learning how to do life. We're learning how to grow up. And sometimes that's hard. And as people who have gone through that, it's very easy to look back at us and go, Come on, pull it together. And I get that. That's totally fine. But just from a general Gen Z perspective, we've had a very different experience coming into the workforce than most others. And so we're asking for balance. And I think that balance is actually flexibility, but
Mhm.
we haven't used the right term yet. And so it's just a flip of the switch,
Mhm.
and trying to figure out how to find now an actual balance between what the Gen Zs are asking for and what really needs to be done. Because
Yeah.
again, I understand that not everybody's going to get what they want. That's not how life works. It'd be great if it was, but it's not, right? And so someone needs to compromise on what side. We just need to find the balance of the compromise in between, which I
Yeah.
think is probably hybrid models. But
Cool. And also when you first came on, we were talking about a little bit about relationships and nothing's 50-50. And,
mhm,
marriages certainly aren't 50-50. Sometimes you're 80-20. Sometimes the other person's 80-20. It's like, that's one thing I love about when Brene Brown talks about that 50-50. And I think companies have thought that they were 100%. and
yeah.
and now it's shifting a little bit in terms of, well, if you don't like what's here, you just leave,
hmm
which was kind of what I grew up in, where now it's like they're listening to keep people and to retain
hmm
the talent maybe a little bit more.
hmm
Again, on a spectrum, it may not be as high as we would like or the way in which we would like, but I don't think it's quite as hard as it used to be. What do you think?
I think you're right there on the nose that pre-COVID, it was an employer's market. They had all
Yes.
of the control. And then COVID happened and it was an employee's market and they had all the control. And now we're shifting somewhere in between and we're trying to find a balance. But the employees have gotten a taste of what that feels like. And so they're desperately trying to hold on to it. And then the employers are used to what the norm is for them having that 100%. And they're frustrated by the others who are now experiencing some of the alternative. And so it's not only is it a battle of who gets what, but it's a battle against if either side should have anything. So it's a really funny, like, people are mad at each other and people are mad that people are mad. So it's
It's what
it's a
great
funny
insights you just
balance.
gave. Those were great insights, Hannah. Those are really, really good. I think you have, well, because of your business and your clarity about who you are, you can definitely see some ways for people to navigate and to move. Thank you for listening today, and we sure hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I kind of have a cliffhanger right for you, ending where I did, but we'll cover it off in part two. So make sure that you listen in for that. And if you like this episode, please leave a comment wherever you listen to your podcasts or tell a friend about us. And join our public Facebook group, Girl Take the Lead, or visit our website, girltaketheleadpod.com. We also have a YouTube channel where your subscription would be appreciated. And we're on YouTube Music where you can see the video version of this episode. Here are the three takeaways from this series. One, remember the three I's from Hannah's dad: intensity, intentionality, and integrity. Two, imposter syndrome doesn't need to be a stop sign, but can be a warning sign and can be a yellow light to tell us to be cautious and intentional. And three, don't let the perception of what you want other people to think about you stand in your way of doing what you need to do. Our next episode will cover the rest of my conversation with Hannah about job searching post pandemic and her podcast, Workish. So make sure to join us for part two. Thanks for being here and talk to you soon. Bye.